It's 2026, and this is what you need to know if you're considering off-grid solar. This is designed for a discussion around the Australian solar industry and specifically off-grid solar. And after the better part of 2 decades in the industry, there is a lot of things that I've seen and come across, and with the current advent of the federal battery rebate, with new products on the market, with I guess somewhat recent transition from, especially in the off-grid world, from lead acid and gel batteries into predominantly lithium, LFP, LiFePO4, other battery chemistries that are out there. Where does that leave you? And because there has been so much relative change in the last, few years, it really has opened up a can of worms where there are so many options out there now that weren't there before. And if you've been looking for a while, things seem to be changing very quickly. If you're new to it, it can just be flat out overwhelming. And so this video is to walk you through what you need to know. And the reason that I'm making this video is because so many people are being done over, the customers, because of slick marketing, jargon they don't understand, things just seem okay on paper and they trust it, and then it all goes bad and sideways. So how can you spot the red flags of products you should or shouldn't work with and companies that you should or should not work with? So this is going to be very much apply it however you see fit. These are my observations and what I have seen and what I am currently going through with our company and what I'm seeing on the ground. So let's dive into this. So number one is understanding that there is a very big difference between the style of equipment that is used in a GridConnect solar system, a hybrid solar system or solar and battery, and an off-grid solar system or a standalone power system. So you have 3 different types of solar systems in their broad terms. So off-grid or standalone means a system that can run indefinitely without being connected to mains power. A hybrid system is halfway between a GridConnect system and an off-grid system. It functions primarily as a GridConnect system. It has battery storage to, I guess, I was going to say exaggerate, but to be able to make the most of that system in its GridConnect function. And then it has a small portion and capability for backup power, which is often referred to as blackout protection. And then at its most basic form, you have GridConnect Solar. And so GridConnect Solar is typically just your solar panels, an inverter, connects into the home switchboard, and it simply produces the power that it can. The home will use however much power it can at the time, and anything extra will be exported back to the grid. That's a standard GridConnect system. So GridConnect Hybrid is basically adding a battery to a GridConnect system with the added bonus of short-term blackout protection. And then you have a big shift into full standalone or off-grid solar systems. The reason I emphasize the big shift component is that it's not what a lot of people have been told, that it is just a little bit different from hybrid. So a hybrid system and an off-grid system are so wildly different in the functionality of the equipment, in the capability of the batteries, and in just all over what it can do, what it's designed to do, and most importantly, what it's approved to do. Now, this video is very much focused on a compliant outcome. We have a lot of rules and regulations in Australia to try and keep things in a pretty tight bracket to make sure that things don't go sideways, to make sure that we don't get electrical faults that we could have prevented, because an electrical fault can very easily become a deceased person, and we would really like to avoid that. And so Australia has some pretty strict rules around what you can use where, cable sizing, how you're meant to fuse cables, where you can run cables. Little things like if you're going to bury a cable underground, there are rules about how deep, how you need to mark it, so that somebody else doesn't go through and cut it and end up exposed to live electricity and hurting or killing themselves or somebody else. So all of that is designed to make sure that if you stay within the compliant factors, you should have a very safe outcome. So the reason that that is important is the number one distinction and the number one thing that I'm going to bring up first that you need to keep an eye out. Here are your red flags. Number one, if you're looking for an off-grid solar system, a standalone power system, if the inverter that is being used in that system says hybrid, then it is not off-grid rated. Now, there may be one or two exceptions, and I'll tell you how to spot the difference. But for the 99.9% of the industry, if that inverter says hybrid, it is not rated nor compliant for use in Australia in an off-grid or a standalone power system. So that's number one. Most inverters are going to have that on the label on the side of the inverter or underneath the inverter, where it gives you all the product details. It will most times say hybrid. If you're not sure, or the quote that you have in front of you simply gives you a model number of the inverter and it doesn't say standalone power system, or it doesn't say off-grid, or it doesn't say hybrid, and you're not sure, there's a very quick way to check. Go to Google or whatever your browser is, type in Clean Energy Council approved inverter list, and you'll see from the CEC a web page about approved inverters. The CEC is the governing body over the approvals and what equipment is approved for what use within Australia. Go to that website, scroll down towards the bottom, and you'll see there's a horizontal bar. There's a lot of columns, so it sort of drags across sideways on the screen, but there's a search bar there. Every inverter that is approved for use in Australia is in that list. Type in your model number. If the model number's a bit out and not quite there, just start with maybe the first 3 letters or numbers. You can also search by brand. So if you know what brand it is, you can search through and scroll till you find the accurate description of your inverter or the inverter that's on your quote. Then you're going to scroll all the way across on that big horizontal scroll at the bottom. And I think it's the 3rd column from the far right in the list of information. Have a look at your inverter, and it will tell you what it is rated for. It will say grid connect. It will say hybrid, or it will say solar and battery. It may use either of those terms. And then the off-grid inverters will stay standalone power, or it will have another off-grid type of wording. Generally, it will say standalone power system. That's its approval class. If your inverter, your inverter is always going to be listed at its highest rating. So if an inverter is approved for use in Grid Connect and solar and battery, or Grid Connect and hybrid, it will show up as a hybrid. If it is approved for use as a hybrid and a full standalone, it will show up as full standalone. So the accreditation required to actually install and sign off on a solar system is also a 3-staged process, or a 3-stage licensing system, and it follows the same pattern. You need to be a fully qualified electrician before you can even sit your accreditations for solar installation. Your first accreditation is for Grid Connect. You must do that one first. Then, secondly, you will get your accreditation, or you have to do your accreditation for a hybrid. Once you've completed those 2, then and only then can you sit to do your off-grid accreditation, or standalone power system, SPS accreditation. So, even licensing recognizes that there is a huge difference between hybrid and off-grid, so much so it needs an additional ticket before you're licensed to do the work. So, when people are telling you that the hybrid inverter is appropriate and approved for off-grid use, no, it is not. You can check it from the CEC website. The other thing you can do is ask the installer or the person who's giving you the quote to see their accreditation, to show that they are actually accredited for full standalone. If they're not, they can't be installing a full standalone off-grid solar system. So they are 2 quick ways to check. And obviously, if it's already written on your quotes, the amount of people that come and talk to us where their other quotes are, oh, we've got this one for an off-grid system and this one here, and you look at it, hybrid inverter. Probably 80% of the comparison quotes that we are talking to people about, they're all hybrid, or 80% of them or thereabouts are hybrid, because it's quick money for the person selling it. The problem is, and let's dive into this, why do you not want to have a hybrid system in a hybrid inverter in an off-grid situation? So let's start with the battery. That's going to be one of the biggest issues. So we've already established the fact that they're non-compliant. So that means you're probably not going to get warranty because it wasn't installed as per manufacturer's specifications. So bye-bye to warranty. If you're trying to get a certificate of occupancy for your home, using a hybrid system in an off-grid situation, if your certifier or council are aware of it and pick up on it, you may not get approved for your certificate of occupancy. If something goes wrong with the system, the installer may or may not come back. If they are engaging in practices that are very questionable and selling you non-compliant equipment in the first place, the likelihood that they're going to be around in 5 years to help you is pretty slim. So they're all of the issues around this using hybrid in off-grid scenarios issues. Then we get technical, batteries. So to give you an example of how different hybrid and off-grid solar batteries are, most people are familiar with Tesla and the Tesla Powerwall. Years ago, probably 5 years ago, Tesla Powerwall was rated for use in off-grid situations. It was approved for SPS, standalone power systems. About 4 years ago, so after they'd been doing it for about a year, maybe a little longer, Tesla actually pulled their certification and then it was delisted on the CEC's equipment list. They pulled the certification for use in off-grid solar and allowed it to only be used in hybrid solar. So why was that? The number one factor is because in an off-grid situation, your battery has to do 100% of the power creation work, the energy transformation from stored energy to usable power. So when you flick a switch and have a big inrush of power, that has to come all off your battery if there's no solar. And so that battery has to go from idle to flat out instantly. That puts a huge amount of pressure on the individual cells inside the battery pack. And so hybrid batteries are generally built a lot lighter because they're not designed to do that kind of work. And so if you make them work really hard like that, it doesn't take long to collapse cells. Now your whole battery's stuffed. Good luck. You probably get 2-3 years out of a hybrid system in a off-grid arrangement like that, and very good chance that your battery pack is going to be dead. Then you go for warranty saying, my battery bank has a 10-year warranty. They're going to look at the recorded data because every inverter now will hold an internal log of how that's been used, and they will see that there is no grid input. It's been running permanently on the backup circuit for its blackout protection. See you later, no warranties. So this is where this gets real out of hand, but it's not going to happen for probably 3 to 5 years. By which time you're just going to be left high and dry. So the reason that the battery is so critical in an off-grid scenario is that because it has got to do 100% of the work at a moment's notice, it needs to be a much more robust build and battery cell type to be able to handle that. A hybrid system and how they differ is they are always designed to be in parallel with the grid. So let's say it's evening, like it's evening now, and you go to use power in a hybrid system and you're no longer producing really anything from your solar, and you go and turn something on and you instantly go and pull 6 kilowatts out of your 10 kilowatt system. You're well within spec for your power sizing and no issue with that. What a hybrid system will do is give you 70% of that power from the battery, but it will take the big spike out of that inrush of power and it will bring that in from the grid just so that the battery doesn't have to work so hard. And that's how it's designed to work. Then you go and put it into an off-grid scenario, all of a sudden it doesn't have that support, it's having to do all that heavy lifting. That's why the battery cells will collapse and fail. So a big giveaway, and this is for the takeaway, this is the red flag part. Check your quote, check the batteries. If the batteries are HV or there is HV anywhere in the actual battery model number, that is a high voltage DC battery. Generally they're around 300-400 volts DC. And they're normally fairly typical in their design where they are like a modular stackable type batteries, pretty common now. So that's another giveaway. That is pretty much only HV batteries. There are some LV batteries, low voltage. Low voltage is generally under 120 volt DC. So you've got most of your lithium batteries now will be 48 volt. There's only a handful of batteries out there that are doing 120 volt because you need an inverter system that is designed to run on that 120 volt. The vast majority of off-grid systems run a 48 volt DC battery. Smaller systems, you'll get down into your 24 volts and still into your lithiums. Then you get into like the four-wheel drive camping type lithium batteries as 12 volts, and you're really into more like DIY and really, really small systems if you're down at 12 volt. I've got a whole nother video on the difference between 12 volt and 48 volt and the battery voltages and how voltage drop and all that kind of stuff works. For this, what you need to know is that HV batteries are a dead giveaway that they are a hybrid battery system and not an off-grid system, not an off-grid battery. So check your inverter, check your battery. You should be running a 12, 24 or 48 volt battery on your battery system for your off-grid inverter system. If it's anything else other than that, start looking really deep as to what it is. Most likely it's going to be a hybrid battery. Hybrid batteries only work with their designated hybrid off-grid hybrid systems, not off-grid. That'll be your giveaway. Okay, next part of this, the things you need to watch out for. When you go to design your off-grid system, there are a couple of key power rating figures you need to know and you need to figure out, or your installer or designer should work with you to figure those things out. Number one, peak demand. And number two is consumption. So when we talk peak demand, that is when I turn on the most amount of electrical items that I'm going to ever run. What does that look like by calculation when I add it up? 2 kilowatts for a kettle, 2 kilowatts for a toaster, 2 kilowatts for a microwave, and when I have breakfast, I want to run all three of those at the same time, plus I want to have the lights going and the water pump might kick in. Okay, so we're at about 7 kilowatts. Now, you don't need 7 kilowatts all day. What you do need is to make sure that if you turn all of those appliances on at the same time, your inverter and battery system can deliver 7 kilowatts of power without overloading and failing. So that's number one. You need to know what your peak demands are, and you should do it for your worst case scenario in summer and your worst case scenario in winter. Because this isn't about how much power you're going to generate. This is about how much power you need the system to deliver. Part two of that, once you know what size that inverter is, that is going to give you sizing minimums that you need for your battery system. Because if you go and put too small of a battery on a large inverter, you're going to over discharge the battery. In other words, you're going to drag too much power out of the battery in too short a period of time. And again, you run the risk of collapsing those battery cells. So you've got to figure that part out. Once you've done that, the other side of it is going to be your consumption. That is how much power you're going to use during an average 24-hour period. Again, you should do this for both summer and winter because generally your usages will be quite different. So consumption is, we have the kettle, the microwave, and the toaster at 2 kilowatts each. So let's just say, for the sake of easy maths, let's say that they're 1 kilowatt each. It'll help the maths work a little neater for you and for me doing it out of my head. So 1, 2, 3 kilowatts, and they're going to run for, let's call it, half an hour. So it draws a kilowatt of power and it runs for half an hour. That would be half a kilowatt hour. The other way to look at this, if we do a different set of maths, if we say that we've got a 2 kilowatt oven and we're going to run it for an hour. So 2 kilowatts times 1 hour gives us 2 kilowatt hours. Kilowatt hours are your measure of volume of storage. Your kilowatt is a instantaneous power rating. So that's what your inverter is rated in, is kilowatts. Your battery, being your energy storage system, that is in kilowatt hours. So that is volume of storage. So what we do is we then go through and we look at all of the electrical items that you're going to use, and we look at how many hours that's going to run. That 2 kilowatt item is going to run for half an hour. That 4 kilowatt air conditioner that's got a actual running current of, say, 1.5 kilowatts, but we want it to run for 12 hours. So that's 1.5 times 12. So you can see just little things like that. Once you start adding this up, that number can get quite big. So if you've got quite a lot of electrical items, you might find that on an average day, you're using 25, 35, 45 kilowatt hours per day. Now, if you ever think to a normal power bill, electricity bill, they generally have your average kilowatt hour per day usage ratings. Now, no usage is the same every day. We're very much working on averages here. What we want to know though, let's say we've calculated out that you're going to need about 20 kilowatt hours a day worth of energy in winter. You're then going to need to have a look at what the average solar irradiation is for your area for your winter months. You find that on the Bureau of Meteorology's website. Southern quarter of Australia, you're going to be somewhere around 2.1, 2.2, somewhere in there. So what you would then do is take let's use 2 as our average solar irradiation. You need 20 kilowatts worth of energy. Solar irradiation per square meter is 2. So we're going to take 20, divide it by that number. 2 gives us 10. So to be able to get 20 kilowatt hours worth of energy production on average on a winter's day, you are going to need a solar array of 10 kilowatts. So that's how you calculate your energy. And then obviously you would do the same for summer, and whichever one needs the larger amount of solar capacity, solar panels, that would then determine how many solar panels you need for your system. So if you're the reason I went right through that, I want you to understand it's a complex process to understand how much solar we need, how much battery we need, what size inverter that we need. So if you've spoken to somebody about getting an off-grid solar system, and they've had a look at your house plans, your roof, and a power bill that you had from your last property, and they just go, yep, cool, this is the system that you're going to need, and that's it. And that's the only real discussion you've had. That's probably a really good warning sign to say that person doesn't know what they're doing, because they're not asking you the right questions. They're not figuring out if this is actually going to work for you in winter or only in summer. These are the sorts of design questions, and it's why good installers are going to spend the time to go through a very comprehensive design process to make sure they get that right. Because if we get it wrong, and you've got a system that is way too small, you're either going to live half your life on a backup generator, or the system's just not going to handle any more input, and now you're going to have to limit your entire lifestyle to match this undersized system. Most people probably not going to enjoy that option. So be very careful if somebody is just coming along and very quickly just putting together a system based on no real information, and certainly you haven't given them all this data for them to be able to design a system properly. You're going to need to dig a little deeper and make sure they're actually doing the right thing by you. That should be a red flag to say, I don't think this person is taking the time and care to design this system properly. So they are probably the biggest things to watch out for. Watch out for hybrid inverter and battery systems. Watch out for people that haven't gone through a design process and actually sized up for your peak demand and your average power usage for both summer and winter, and actually mapped all of that out and figured it out for you. If they haven't done that stuff, and they haven't gone through any kind of real design process, it's probably a really good indicator that they are not giving you the right system. They're just trying to make a quick sale and sell you something. So hopefully that has been useful for you. As I said, the reason I've made this is because so many people we have been speaking to, especially over the last 6 months, have just got fistfuls of quotes for off-grid solar, and they're all hybrid. And all that's doing is destroying people's faith in humanity, because they're going to get a couple of years into these systems, they're going to fail, they're going to be left without warranty, they're going to be left without support, and it looked good on paper. It was half the price of a full off-grid system, so it had to be better because it was cheaper. And then a few years down the track, and they're just going to all fall over, and the poor customer is now left without their $40,000 and without a power system. So this is why I want you to be careful. And again, I don't care who you go with. I'm not saying you have to come and talk to us. We have limited capacity at DCI. We're not going to be able to help all of you, no matter how we want to skin this at the moment. It's not within our capacity, but I want all of you out there, even if it took you 6 months longer to find the right installer, spending more money on a quality off-grid system with a good installer is going to save you so much headache for the next 20 years, rather than, hey, we can get it for half price today and we'll just run the risk, and surely hybrid can't be too bad. And the guy seemed nice, so let's just go with it. you're just setting yourself up for failure. And if you've got a quality system that is going to last you for 20 years, which is what a good off-grid system will do, and your other option is to have what looks good on paper, but a hybrid system that may last between 2 to 5 years, let's say it does last the full 5 years. It means you're going to have to replace it every 5 years, and not at today's price, at 5 years worth of inflation price, then at 10 years worth of inflation price, then at 15 years worth of inflation price. By the time you've done that, you bought your good system 2 to 3 times over. If you buy a proper system from a good supplier, a good installer up front, you can avoid all of those headaches. And that's why I'm making this, to try to give you the information you need to make a better, more informed decision. So take care, keep an eye out on those quotes, do your homework and find somebody who is reputable and worth working with. And best of luck, and I hope you have an amazing off-grid solar journey.